We're back. It's Thursday. Today is November 12th, the year 2020. Welcome aboard Crushing Iron Podcast. This is episode 425.
As you said, almost 500.
Yeah, in triathlete speak, it's basically 500.
It's 500.
It's what'd you run today? 3 point, I don't know, it's like 5. I ran around 5 miles. Which you really, when your Garmin say, 3.2, but whatever. It's like basically 5. Hey, welcome.
We don't do that, do we?
I don't. I think it's always good to undersell. Yeah, I ran around 2 to 3 today.
It's a skill, I think, to really kind of be able to rein that exaggeration principle in.
It is. Or to just strictly, okay, I'll be fair. It's kind of a fine line you have to walk, because if you say exactly what it is, then you sound like the anal retentive. So like if somebody's like,
3.73.
So like, sometimes I'll be in the neighborhood and like I'll be walking the street and I'll see some of our neighbors doing their like morning walks. Like, hey, bro, how far did you run this morning? And my first thought is, okay, first off, are you asking for duration or time? What do you need to know here?
It's always duration.
It's always, that's not always duration, because they want to be like, well, how far did you run?
That's what I meant.
Yeah, it's always distance. It's always distance. Like if somebody's like, oh, what was your overall time? Time is stress. I'm like, oh, I love you. Like we would have kindred spirits.
Like who says that?
Nobody says that except for me.
Hey,
but they're like, let's say you run like, 9.35. And you'd be like, well, I'd ran like 9.35. They'd be like, oh, so you're that guy who has to be specific. Why can't you just say 9? Right? Because then you're like, I'm underselling it. And then she might think that I'm out of shape and I'm like the cul-de-sac loser. But then you don't want to round it up and be, lie about it and be dishonest and be like, that ran around 10. I ran 10 miles. Be like, wow, that's incredible. And then you feel like, I didn't run 10. I think it's a fine line to walk.
Is it almost 10 or is it just 9?
So now that I'm talking it through, and we'll get to like the meat of the podcast here in a second in our actual,
this is the meat.
In our actual intro. But I now understand when people do like the parking lot laps to get their clock to like click over to, an even number, because I feel like what they're trying to actually do is avoid that conversation. Like they're trying to be honest and authentic when they don't want to be like, hey, how was your, like, it was pretty good. I ran 4.82 in 37.45 minutes. You're like, I don't want to say that. And you're like, I ran 4. And then the conversation's over. Like there is no other conversation. You feel honest about yourself. Everyone does it, whatever. You're like, how far did you go? I rode my bike for 4 hours. And like, how long did you really ride? So riding time was probably what? 2:55, cafe stops and bananas and whatever was probably an hour and 5. Just, we're out for 4 hours. Like that group we always see on the Tracer out there. We always leave. Let's say we leave at like 6 o'clock. If we're doing a camp, we come back around at 10. I think we see him once on the road, and we see him 5 other times out on like benches. And they're like, dude, good long ride today. 4 hours in. I'm like, that's not 4 hours, but we do that. Anyway.
What's the opposite? Do we do it the other way on something in life?
We undershoot it?
Yeah.
Probably with like, hey, how's your day going? It's pretty good. And inside you're like, this is really going terrible.
Yeah. Well, that's true.
I think most people do that, but
I think sleep we do that with.
I didn't get a very good sleep last night, but I'm sure we do it in something. I'm sure we undersell. What?
You didn't get good sleep?
I was up early this morning, 4:15.
Okay. So was I. An onslaught of sirens again. I got to figure out my noise. What a white noise.
You got to get in.
I got to get new speakers in there. I got to
surround sound
up my room.
I have like the crashing waves, and I often get given a hard time because it sounds like it sounds like we are living in Florida during a hurricane. Like I like it.
That's what I want,
like it
though.
Loud. Like I would rather be in the middle of a hurricane than hear, other weird noises and that you might hear when trying to go to sleep. Anyway,
I want to hear owls and
owls.
This is like northern woods type thing.
Speaking of owls, whose podcast is this? This is ours. This is the Crushing Iron Podcast, as we said, episode 425. We appreciate you tuning in. We appreciate you sticking with us these first 3 or 4 minutes if you talk about random things. But to be honest with you, that's kind of what we do. We talk about triathlon. We talk about life. We'll oftentimes get into more of the specifics in terms of training and philosophy and swim, bike, and run. We'll talk about nutrition. We'll do race recaps. We'll do race previews. A lot of times we'll talk about what our current athletes are going through, and oftentimes what Mike and I are going through, both as coaches and athletes. And then sometimes we'll pop into our Facebook group and to our community, which is Crushing Iron Group. If you want to search that, we'll answer one simple question and we will let you right in. A lot of great people in there. Sometimes we'll hop in there and let that community drive our conversation. But for the most part, we just sit back, relax, have an open, honest discussion about usually current topics that are going on in life, what's going on with Mike and I are athletes, but we have no sponsors, we have no ads. Our only agenda is to hopefully do our part to help keep you happy and healthy and enjoy what can be a really awesome endurance sports lifestyle, and do it for a long period of time, and allow yourself to see yourself grow, which is, again, it's a really great sport. All endurance sports, no matter what, as it was triathlon, cycling, running, anything endurance wise, I think it offers us unique opportunities to not just, get healthier and watch ourselves perform and be competitive, but I think specifically in the world of endurance sports allows us to really grow as people and find out things about ourselves in a healthy manner. So that's what we do. And we may talk about more specific things. I definitely want to talk about, we had 10 athletes race Ironman Florida this last weekend. And we had an athlete previously do Tempe 70.3, which was the first 70.3 in the first race that the Ironman has put on in the United States. And then they obviously had this race this last weekend. And then next weekend, if all goes according to plan, you got Ironman Cozumel, Ironman Arizona, and then you got Texas 70.3. And so yesterday on our Zoom call, we had a lot of questions from Ironman Arizona athletes about, hey, what is the new, now they've actually got a few under their belt, what's like the new, their return to racing protocol, how has it affected athletes racing, what should you be on the lookout for? So I do think it's important to touch on some of those today, because I think it is going to affect everyone's racing experience. If I understand, most of it's kind of gone off without a hitch and not much. I mean, triathletes are always going to find something to complain about, but I do want to talk about it today because I think it's important, as I think we'll see most of those guidelines implemented for a decent majority of the year. But we'll talk about that today after we, talk about a lot of nothing for probably 25 or 30 minutes.
No, I don't think we talk about nothing.
Yeah.
I would like to mention that we have a club coaching program for next year. And it's basically, we just set you up for the whole year. You lay in the races and we design a custom training plan around your race schedule for next year and take the stress and worry out of your life. $349.
Yeah. Hop on our website.
Pretty sweet deal.
C26triathlon.com. It's our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. Click on the coaching tab. Scroll down 3, click on club membership, learn more about it there. But it's a great opportunity for athletes who are looking for structure for the year, and for someone and to take away the stress of planning everything out for them, especially when you have a bunch of races. Like, a lot of athletes are going to have a lot of races and probably different times of the year they had not originally planned on having, which can cause stress in terms of, when do you move over to a build phase? When do you recover? When do you hop back in? And that's something we'll be happy to take care of for you and help set you up for success next year.
So you may ask how we do that, right? Right now, that's why it's a good time to get in now, because we're laying in some maintenance plans. I'm getting to know the athletes. We're kind of seeing where you're at, watching your workout, seeing what feels good, seeing what doesn't. And, just seeing where you're coming from and where you want to go. And then we kind of lay it down that way.
We lay it down.
Lay it down.
I like that. We do lay it down.
Lay it down.
And we have a lot of
50
athletes.
Cent wants you to get in the club.
We need to bring his tune in so we can hit on our new little board over here. Speaking of laying it down, there are plenty of athletes that are going to be racing here in the next few weeks. And so I did think it was important to I know we have athletes that are probably racing, they're listening. We have a lot of athletes that are anxious to hear about how things are going to look. And this came up a few times yesterday on the weekly Zoom call that we do with our athletes. And yesterday I did a kind of an open Q&A. And that was what a lot of the questions were kind of about, was, what to expect and how it's going to affect you. And as you and I were talking a little bit off air, I think it's just another perfect example of why, you can never compare a race to a race, even if it's in the exact same location on the exact same date the next year. Even if the conditions are somewhat similar, something always changes. It always changes. And one of the biggest differences that I've seen just in watching, and if you're not familiar with the return to racing format or the guidelines, you can go to Ironman.com and click on those. And USAT has the same thing that I've read from race directors. And it's about, obviously, in returning to racing safely and what they're going to doing to, make people feel more comfortable and be safe. And the first thing that I have noticed is, I've heard from athletes that they actually like some of the changes, the pre-race changes, the one-stop shop, there's no multiple check-ins. It's more of a hands-free, you just kind of go and do your thing. Most people that I've talked to, I think everyone of our athletes has loved the fact that the pre-race meetings are now on YouTube. They're not hey, go show up at 9 different times. I'm thank God. They should listen. What?
I like it. I like being around the people. You don't see
what?
them.
Okay. I'm going to call bullshit right here. How many pre-race meetings have you ever been to where you've sat down and listened?
It's not about listening to it. I talk to people that are
okay. So it's not about the content. It's about the opportunity to be an extrovert.
You go there like you have like 2 questions in your mind the whole time, and you hope you don't miss them. You know, and it's usually something to do with the current weather conditions or something with a change in the course.
They're totally worthless.
They are not totally worthless.
99%.
I just like sitting there with people and sweating.
99. It's right. Hey, the height is me 100. Let's go all get crowded underneath a white tent where we're going to blaze with no heat and no draft. And let's just sit here for 45 minutes while 99% of the people ask questions that are already answered in the athlete guide. They're already answered. Period.
It's a social event.
It is. Now, I will say now that things have changed, that they've never been more important. But what's better than sitting back in your hotel bed or your Airbnb in your PJs, watching the YouTube? Like, it's great, and you can rewind it if you miss something. Like, oh my God, like this is. Don't listen to him right now. He is so full of crap. This is all about getting because I think I know what it is.
What?
So when Mike and I go to events and we go to races, and whether we're participating or we're just going to support our team or making our rounds, we'll show up to the expo, and you would think. You're laughing. You know where it's going. And everyone knows it's true. And we show up, we both walk in the same time. You would think I don't exist. Like, have you ever seen the movie Twins? I'm Danny DeVito and he's Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Is this more about me or you?
This is it's about both of us. Okay. And everyone wants to get a selfie with Mike, and they'll walk up to me. I'm like, oh, look, a great fan. They're like, hey, Robbie, can you hold my phone, take a picture of Mike and I? I'm like, oh, of course I can. Like, let me be part of this really special moment. So I feel like that's really what you're talking about. Is you're not going to get to walk around like the stud that you are, and get the 19,000 selfies that you usually get during Ironman weekend.
There's a little, okay.
Truth.
So now that you say that like that, cause I go to a lot of races even when I'm not racing.
Yeah.
So I don't go there to just like, if I'm not racing, I like being out and around and meeting new people and, talking to them about the club and I'm just
stop.
But no, I do. There's something about it. They give you a lot of options and you can kind of pick your own schedule and you just go out and say, hey, I haven't seen you since, Rev 3 in Knoxville.
Buddy. Hey, buddy.
Hey, buddy.
Yeah, when you don't remember their name, like, hey, what's up, bud? Anyway, so outside of the photo ops for Mike, I think that's been a good thing. I do think, and this is actually, more on topic and trying to stay on task here, is that you need to expect longer times. And I'm not saying that to like make you feel, frustrated or disgruntled about like your upcoming race. Yes, 100%.
You're going to be slower.
You aren't going to be slower. The event itself is going to take longer for you to move through, I think is the best way to look at it. That's why, again, like you can't judge every race. This is just another great example why you can't judge every race. It's about, and like, the biggest bit of feedback that I've gotten from every athlete is that the transitions are going to take a significantly, are going to take a lot longer. They're going to take a lot longer to move through. Like T1, like I think for most athletes, just to get from an Ironman Florida, they left the swim and most of them didn't even get to their bike until 5 or 6 minutes later. So the venues themselves are going to have to be spread out.
Like slowing you down?
It's just
they walk you through like a car wash type of situation?
They should, coming out of the ocean. But like what most of them are have to do, they're going to have to spread everything out to meet whatever their county guidelines or the way Ironmans are doing things. So they're going to have to spread things out a little bit more. Obviously, I think Ironman Florida has always been a little bit more of a run, and then you're going to have to do everything. You're just not going to get any help. You're not going to have volunteers in the changing tents helping you help the changing tents getting things out of your bag, helping you with chamois cream, doing the whole deal. Like you're going to do every single thing by yourself. Special needs. Halfway through the bike, and they're not long gone, but gone for now, are the days where you ride your bike and you're like, hey, 343, and this really awesome volunteer goes and grabs your bag, walks it up to you, and you can either grab it and keep biking and grab your stuff and toss the trash, or you can stop quickly, grab your nutrition and go. Now you have to rack your bike, get off, get it yourself, get your stuff, and then get back going. So you're looking at more minutes there. And I know that in the scheme of things, like in a 70.3 or obviously you're not going to have a special needs drop in 70.3, but in a full, I think minutes don't matter. But when you add 5, 6, 7, 10 minutes in transition, and then special needs, and then T2, like you're looking at, I think we kind of came to the consensus yesterday in talking to the athletes that you need to expect like a 12 to 18 to 20 minute difference in your Ironman time, just from transitions and it being more of like a self-service type race. Which is a lot of time. Like that is a significant amount of time. And so I think that's like when you take away those factors and look at it more like, hey, let's say you ended up finishing in 11 hours or 11:10 and you really wanted to go a sub 11 and, PR and your previous, PR is like, 10:59 or whatever. And you're doing like an 11:07, 11:08. Like you have to go back and look at like how much time you're purging in transitions. That's just part of it. The other big thing that I didn't even know, but they told me yesterday was that the aid stations are no longer 1 mile apart, at least in Florida. They were 2 miles apart, which is actually very big difference. And most people really only depend on, not most people, but a lot of people really only depend on the aid stations. They don't want to carry anything. They don't want to carry anything extra. I mean, who would? If you're doing a run a marathon after biking 112 and swimming 2.4, why would you want to carry anything extra? A lot of the athletes are now choosing to carry a bottle with them to make it in the next station. Because think about it. Some athletes are gonna, they're gonna make it from aid station in 14 minutes. Some are it's gonna take them 23, 24 minutes. If you start walking, it's gonna take you 30 minutes to get from one aid station to the next, not 15. If you're walking, or 12 if you're running a little bit slower. So like that's a lot of time. So people are gonna have to start. I think it's going to actually. And we talked about this yesterday in the Zoom. Is that I think the early on advantage for athletes is going to be for athletes that accept these changes and adapt to them quickly and race smarter, versus the athletes who are like, I can make it 2 miles between aid stations. I don't need to take anything with me. I don't want to carry that extra weight, baby, because that's going to slow me down. I'm going to lose two seconds per minute mile. Like you and I saw this, I think you raced that year, but I saw this as like the best example I could ever give was Louisville 2 years ago, when they shortened the swim and it was freezing cold. It was ice cold that morning. And you saw these mostly dudes, because guys are stubborn and most guys are dumb, 20 to 40-year-old dudes in insane shape, with like 3% body fat. They came roaring out of the swim into the transition and didn't even blink to put on gloves, to put on a windbreaker, to put on arm warmers. They're like, I got to go, baby. I got to stay aero. I got to get my time. This is going to slow me down. I got this. And then about 20 minutes later, they were bussing back. So many professionals, and I would consider like elite level, very in shape, mostly dudes, in just their spandex tri-suit with no gloves, with no arm warmers, with no jacket, with no anything else, freezing. And they had to drop out. Because all they were concerned about was saving an extra minute in transition that it might have taken to put on extra gear, or I'm gonna lose some watts, baby, with not wearing my windbreaker on this bike, but you're going to freeze. And then you saw athletes who ended up racing really well, and the key to their performance was staying warm. So like I really do think in terms of performance and being competitive, the better you can adapt and adjust, and then I think really adapt, adjust, and accept is the biggest thing. Is like, these are just changes you're gonna have to deal with. Like you can't think, oh, my transition time is slower. I'm behind schedule. I'm behind my tri-calc evaluation for the day, which I had originally given myself. I've already kind of had this conversation with myself for Texas coming up. I'm like, all right, I think at my last year was like, or the time I did was like 3.5, 4 minutes for transition. This year I'm like, well, you're going to go ahead and probably lose 3 to 4 in each. That's 8 minutes. That's a lot in a 70.3 to get. That's almost a mile on the run, if you think about it that way. And so like, I think that's one of those things where you have to just accept it and put it off, put it out of your mind and think, this is just going to be different. And there's nothing I can do about it except for understand the changes that have been made and the changes that are being implemented and what's required of me to get through my race the best of my ability. So those are the biggest ones. I'll get the swim start in a minute, but those are pretty significant changes. I think the spacing of the aid stations on the run is actually fairly large in terms of having something every single mile, then going to 2 miles. Now you're basically, I think really it's a what it sounds like. It's a chaperoned Ironman. Instead of what usually people give a hard time, the Ironman, like, oh, there's always about money. But if you do one, they're pretty much full service. Like you don't have to, you get your wetsuit stripped, you walk in, a volunteer's like, hey, what bike? And they take your bike from you. They got your bag ready. If you get a good volunteer, like, hey dude, let me get your shoes off. They're like putting socks on your feet, right? Yeah. It's a concierge service event. You get off the bike and a volunteer's like, hey, we'll take your bike from you. You don't have to go rack it. They'll take your bike from you and you're like, bye, take it, see you later, put it in, I don't see it again. And then you run in transition, you grab your bag and people are on the bag drop and they're like, hey, I'm 342. They'll grab your bag for you, help you find it, run with you in the transition and again, help you get your bike stuff off. They'll put sunscreen. Like it's a full service event. And now it's going to be the opposite. It's going to be bare bones volunteers with barely they can get by. And you're going to have to do everything yourself and you're going to have to be prepared for that. And I think 70.3, you can probably get away with it because you should probably be able to handle everything on your own anyway. And most 70.3s, if not all, don't have special changing tents anyway. But you should have, for an Ironman, it's going to change things. And I think it's going to add time. But the athletes that are going to be able to respond to that the best are going to be the ones that adapt the best.
I mean, when you put it in those terms, it is kind of amazing how much service they give you at these races. The immediate thought I had is I went back to my first time at Wisconsin, and when I got off the bike, I didn't realize that I didn't have to put my bike back. And when I came up that hill, and that was really wearing on me because I was like, man, that's a long, long run with my bike right now. And I could barely walk after that first race I did. And then they took my bike and I was like, that was like a game changer.
Like the greatest thing ever.
What? This is the coolest thing ever. So it's almost like you got to expect the least and be grateful for what else they give you on top of that going into these races. And yeah, it's kind of amazing that really it is that big of a helpful situation with the volunteers, and they really get into it. And that's a big part of it's really great that they do that they have, because it's kind of amazing that people are just there to help you and they love doing it and it's fun for them. And it's like a weird counteraction is like you're in a hurry and all these people are just laying your stuff out and putting on your arm warmers or whatever they're doing. You said something earlier about like that people underdressing for the bike and how that can really just screw up your whole day. And because I was at that race and I think I went the other way, so it was like I think it's safe to do that, but there was a part of me that was like, man, just a little bit too much, So there's that weird line, but it's just so hard to predict, right? I mean, because I did get out there and I was certainly warm, but I didn't feel like I ever found a bike groove that day. I was just sort of out there riding. And I think that's the trade-off sometimes. I didn't really have a solution, and I didn't want to because there was one time when I started taking off my jacket though, and it got a little nippy.
You're like, I'm going right back on.
I'm not going to do that because I think at some point it's like impossible to warm up, right?
You can't. I was talking about that when I did that ride at the lab a few weeks ago. It was like you got to a point to where like I just physically can't exert more energy to raise my core tip high enough to keep me warm. So I need my clothing to do it for me. Mm-hmm. And especially when you're that fatigued, you just can't do it. And the other thing is like,
talk about that a little bit, because I thought that was fascinating when you're talking about because that was one of the things I always wondered about, like in the cold, why it was like last year at Wisconsin, it was a little bit colder than normal. And I felt like that bike was just a little bit harder for me.
I mean, it's like an easy, even Google search, like cycling in cold weather is harder. The air is more dense, so it's harder. It's harder to keep your body warm because you're already for your body to warm up and produce the energy that it needs, because it's also harder to consume calories when it's a little bit colder. Those all play a part in it. But you get to a point, and I know I got to this point where it's like, I couldn't produce. I was as warm as my body was going to get. And then as the sweat was going and the winds were picking up, it was like I was becoming colder, but I didn't have, again, like in the early part of the racket where I pick up the power a little bit and like really not slam it, but push it a little bit and go probably above what I wanted to go to raise my core temp. But then obviously once you get going, like especially in a full, like in Louisville, like I think the last 3 years in Louisville, like conditions change. It's like the year before that I did it, I think the last 30 minutes of the bike, last 30 miles of the bike, it went from like 60 and 70 and sunny. And then it was like, people are freezing to death because the temperature, like everything changes. But in terms of like when you're on the bike, like you just can't, I think the best description I can give is like when you see athletes run on a marathon. And again, I'll use Louisville example because it had some very cold years, is that you have athletes that are in like tank tops and shirts and they're full on tri kit and they're running, they look fine. And then the minute they cross the finish line, they are shivering. Like the minute they're unable to do the work and produce the energy that provides or that raises their core temp, their teeth are chattering, they're freezing, they cannot get warm. Like it is instant. And that happens on the bike if you don't dress them. I think it's always better to be warmer than it is to be colder, because you can fuel, you can take it up. Like you said, you got hot enough, you're like, I think I'm going to lose a little, now I'll probably zip this back up and keep it on. Like it's just better to, I mean, the year I got, going back to Texas again, like the year that I did it, remember I was freezing when I got done with the race. Like when I finished, I was like unzipping my kit. I was free. I mean, I was burnt. Like I was fried. I unzipped my kit. I was like, I'm frying right now. And 10 minutes later, I was borrowing clothing. I looked like a homeless man. I was borrowing like full fingered gloves. I had your hoodie on. I think I had somebody's random, like, toboggan on. I was freezing cold. Like, and the temperature didn't change a bit. I think it got actually warmer, but it just goes to show you how much, like how warm you make your body in cycling, especially, is like that. So you have to make decisions based on that. And then in the other direction, when you look at races now, like Arizona could be very warm. Cosmo's probably gonna be very warm. Texas is probably gonna be very warm. Like it's like you look and you think, all right, well, if I'm not gonna have any help and I can't depend on, because it is like when volunteers come back, they're never going to be appreciated more than they are when we come back. Because for most people, you've gone your whole Ironman racing career without probably, but not thanking them, but like not really understanding like, oh, well, this is kind of what I pay for. This is like the experience. Now you're like, no wetsuit strippers, right? So like, you got nobody helping you in transition. You got nobody telling you where to go. You got nobody helping you with your bag and nobody untying it for you. Like, oh, your fingers, I got it. You're like, it's you. You're doing it by yourself. You get help along the way, and that's minutes, not just minutes, but the amount of stress that volunteers can remove is priceless. Because I've seen it, and I've watched it as a spectator. I've watched it in transition. A guy can be fumbling to get his shoes untied or get his shoe on, or like it's cramping up, and the volunteer's like, I got it. Just sit there, relax, drink your stuff. I'll untie your bag. I'll get your shoes off. I'll help you put them on. Right. I mean, like, I don't think Allie would even help me put my socks and shoes on because, my feet are gross. And it's like, no one is willing enough to do that. Like but they save you time and they remove the stress because you have someone there to help you. And most athletes struggle with that because like now it's going to be 100% on you. When it's time for you to look around and think, I need some help, it's just me. People are going to, I think, become a little more frantic. And when you're frantic and you're frenzied, you make bad decisions.
Have you heard anything about them loosening restrictions on outside assistance because of this?
No, because I mean, honestly, they basically banned all spectators, so you shouldn't be getting outside assistance anyway.
Oh, that's right, man. That's always been an interesting one to me because, people, how sneaky people, it's so funny because like, if you just, I don't know, like I remember one time wearing a jacket or something I didn't want to throw away. I was like, hey, I'm gonna throw this on the edge of the trash can. You can just pick it up in a few minutes.
Tie it around your waist, buddy. Don't want to get a DQ.
Yeah. So, but let's go into, do we want to go into the no spectator thing? I mean, like, how do they? They
can't. I mean,
I saw that the finish line was like, oh,
it was so nobody was at the finish line. I think what they're doing is obviously they can't police the entire race course. It's impossible. But I think what they were basically saying is in these concentrated areas, which are like transition and finishing line, like we're not allowing spectators. And obviously, from what I understood on the run course and race course, you can't stop it. Like there's plenty of people still out. The drunks were still out, partying and giving people college football scores on the whiteboard like they do all the time in Ironman, Florida, because it's on a Saturday. Like that's still going to go on. I think it's also probably very dependent on like what kind of race course it is. Like, is it a spectator friendly course already? Let's be honest. Most triathlons in general aren't spectator friendly until you even get to the run, but that's definitely a change. I think the swim start's another change. Like you're going to have to prepare differently in the morning to have more hydration, have fueling. You're probably gonna have to time your pre-race breakfast a little bit differently because it's going to take a lot longer to get in the water. Like that was another thing that I used to love about mass starts was that we all started at the same time. The gun went off. And I will say, and I'm not going to rant about it too much. At least I say that, but I'm on my third cup of coffee. I think the part I hate the most about the loss of the mass start isn't just the experience, isn't just the image of the mass start, everybody starting together. It's always knowing where you are. the part that I don't hate, but I think is frustrating for a lot of people, because whether you're going for a personal best or just to finish it or to be competitive or to place in your age group, no matter what, everyone on that race course is competitive. And you no longer can think, is the person that I'm passing, am I actually ahead of them? Or is the person that's passing me, are they now really passing me? Because it takes so long to get people in the water now that it could be 30 minutes. Like, I think that's a part, like, and again, like I'm sure I'll get some backlash from people like, oh, it only matters for the, it matters to everyone. I think when you're on the race course, when you're on the run course, to think, I'm passing this person. I'm like, I think it's a mental and emotional boost to think that's another person that I am doing better than today. I mean, it is competitive. I think being competitive is fine.
It's a race.
It is a race. Like, you're racing yourself and you get those moments and you're like, this feels good. Like, you just don't know where you are anymore. I know I've had athletes that have, like, I did this last weekend. We had an athlete run their way on the podium, and and this athlete had no idea, but I couldn't even celebrate in the moment. I had to refresh my screen on the Iron Track for 20 minutes to make sure that someone that started 30 minutes behind her didn't come in and have a faster time.
Yeah. So instant replay.
It's like you wait for it, and you're like, oh, okay, we did do this. And so it steals it. And so when you're looking at times now, that was one of the things that Molly Morgan, one of our athletes, said about Tempe 70.3 was it took forever to get people in the water for a 70.3. And I think especially when the conditions are going to be hot, you are going to have to be really, really aware of your fueling, your nutrition, your timing, because I'm sure, and the other thing is you're going to have to wear a mask up until the point you get in the water. So I'm trying to mentally prepare myself for that. It's like getting in line at Texas 70.3 is I am going to try and be one of the first people in the water. Because I don't want to have to stand there for an hour and drink fluids when it's probably going to be hot and wear a mask, because your heart's already going to be high because you're nervous, right? And you're going to have a wetsuit on. That's another thing, is you look at these hot races. Texas is probably going to be, and Tempe, I think Tempe was this way too, is you look at races that are going to be warm. And I talked about this with the athletes, was on the Zoom call, it's already going to be warm. Ironman Florida ended up being fairly warm for what we thought it was going to be in November. And you think about, you even see athletes walk from their hotel room fully zipped up in their wetsuit. And I always look if and when I wear a heart monitor when I race, when I put my wetsuit on, I'm up 10 beats without question. Just because you're raising your core temp, you're restricted, your body temp goes up, your heart rate goes up. So you're wasting beats there. And then I can't imagine standing in a wetsuit for 45 to 50 minutes with your swim cap on, with a mask on, and not having some kind of effect on your race in terms of just overheating and burning calories and burning energy. I don't want to do that. So I would suggest find your way to the front of the line. Try to be one of the first ones in the water, because you'll be the first ones out, you'll be the first one on the course. You won't have to worry about that. Was another thing I think I heard, was that, some of the aid stations were kind of a struggle in terms of, because how athletes do, they'll come by and grab 19 bottles of water, end up taking in 2 tablespoons. They're just dousing their body and throwing it. There's a lot of waste that goes on. And right now you don't have volunteers to help you out and help you make those decisions and hand you, 1 bottled water. You can have people that are trying to grab 14 probably. So I think the swim start's another thing you need to think about in terms of hydrating yourself, fueling, preparing, keeping your core temp down, carrying a bottle of ice, if you're going to be in the back of the line for the swim start, and trying to stay as cool as possible, especially for the warmer races, at least.
Well, when you say that about the wetsuit and how you believe and your heart rate goes up just by putting on a wetsuit, I think people's heart rate's already up because of the swim. You know what I mean? So then you're adding more, your heart rate's higher than you would normally be getting into the pool or something like that. Always. Maybe 15, 20 beats, whatever it is. Then suddenly you get in there and you're spiking even higher. And that's where the anxiety probably comes from. It's all these kind of cascading variables start you at a higher place than you normally would, and you're raising it because you're amped up, and then you're swimming harder than you normally do. And that's probably why that's probably a big, reason for anxiety.
Oh, for sure. It's you're already amped.
All those things.
I told our athletes specifically, I said, I don't want to see an image of you with your wetsuit on unless you're about 5 minutes away from getting in the water.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing, is that there is no timing. There is no like gun anymore that goes off to be like, oh, I'm late. It's like, oh, you don't have your wetsuit on time? Then take a step back and let Timmy and Joe go ahead, and then you can get in after them. You still get the same time. Like you don't start till you get in. So don't put it on. There will be other people out there to help you, to at least get it on. But again, that's another thing. Like just now that I'm talking about, I'm like, but are there going to be people that can help you get on? Like, are you going to be allowed to be that close to somebody else to allow them to get their wetsuit on? So do you have to have it on, way ahead of time? And if you do, then you need to take like, empty bottles, old bottles of water, fill them with ice and water to keep yourself cool and just get in the water as quickly as possible. It's going to be, you're going to have to, I'm telling you, it's going to be about who adapts and races the smartest in terms of like how a lot of these races happen out of the gate. Obviously, if it's a cool race, it's not going to really matter. And I think a lot of the races have been smaller already, so it's not taking that long to get people in. But you have to adapt. And I think that I know it's not gonna, beating the dead horse here, but the athletes that are smarter and more willing to be flexible and acknowledge that they may lose 2 or 3 minutes doing this are the ones that are going to gain 6 or 8 minutes doing it. Like we also talk about that on the bike. It's like, I might gain 5 minutes on the bike over 112 miles, which is insignificant, by pushing it, from 180 to 195 watts. But then of those 5 minutes, how many of those are you going to lose quickly on the run? Right. And so it's all about a give and take in time and return on investment. It's like, is the time I'm spending now going to gain me time or at least help me stop the purging and the bleeding of time later on in the race by cooling yourself from the beginning and changing. And so people are going to be so wrapped up in racing the same old way that they're probably not going to probably wrap their brain around this new way of racing that we're going to have for at least the next few months, that they're going to make massive errors in judgment. And I'm already considering running with a bottle on the run course, just because I don't want to have to worry about when am I going to get my fluids. I want to be able to at least get through the first half knowing I have my fluids and my nutrition on person. And then after that, if I feel like I'm getting enough, then I'll just toss it and I'll buy a new one later. But, it's better to be set up for success than to, again, which I think most athletes, to their detriment, especially when you used to have volunteers, assume that it's going to be there. Assume that, and that's the thing is, again, like I had an athlete say, they were waiting to get to the aid station. When they got there, there was nothing there. It was like what they needed wasn't there. And they're like, now I got to wait 2. You're not going 4 miles, right? Without getting what you need. You have to over prepare on the bike. You have to over prepare on the run, especially in a full, again, not as much in a half because you're going to be out there so much less time, but you have to think through those things. And it's going to be, again, lean itself towards people who are willing to problem solve and adapt and take what the day gives them and do the best they can. And, be more execution style.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's an interesting dynamic that they're throwing at us because, I tend to bring a little bit much in general. And I always kind of like, I'm the guy that's running with, 87 goos in the back of it, bouncing up and down in the back of his shirt. And then by the end, I'm like, why did I do that? Because all these aids you're not, like we always just say, you're not going out on a walkabout. I mean, there's there's servers the whole way, but now it could be different. It's interesting. So do they even have people there or they just have stuff sitting on a table? Did they say that? Or, I could see how that could get a little dicey if you need something and you can't get it to 4 miles. And then
I'm sure they have people there monitoring it, but they're not going to have people there full service handing you things. Usually you'd see like 10, 15, sometimes 20 people at an aid station. And now I think it's more like you have like probably an aid station leader or whatever. It's like, making sure that they can radio and say, hey, we're running out of water. Please, bring the gator over here and bring us more water. But so I think you're going to have to be aware, you're going to have to adapt, and you have to, like you said, you're better off being that guy with the 35 goos hanging out of their back pocket than the guy that's like, I'll get it at an aid station. It's all about being minimal. I don't want to carry more weight. What's going to kill my, watts per kilo. It's going to make me less aero. When you bonk, it's going to feel very non-aero, no matter where you are. So you're going to have to prepare differently. And I think that's just part of it. And I think that's how endurance sports are anyway. Like, just be honest, like you're always having to adapt to something, whether it's the weather, whether it's the terrain, like every course is different. All the weather is different. Your life is different. There's so many things all the time that make it to where you It is. It's not just a physical fatigue. It's a mental and emotional fatigue game about how on point you can stay. And that was again, what I loved about, we talked about Monday about Erickson and his email. Is like, his thing, and he emailed back and said, I think got it from Crow. He was like, win the moment. Just win this moment, because every race is made up of little moments. And if you can win each moment, you can not get frustrated. You can focus on what needs to be done, and you can understand that that's just part of the day. And it might be uncomfortable, but you just have to win that moment so you can get to the next one. Because if you don't, and you continue to lose and lose and lose moments, and you're not going to even get to the moments you can win, because you'll be so frustrated and so discouraged and probably so out of it that you won't even want to get to that point. And that you will succumb to it, and you will quit, or you will bow out, or you will have a very subpar race because you mentally and emotionally allowed yourself to have all those thoughts and feelings overcome what you were capable of doing that day.
Yeah. And I don't know if it would really matter or not, but like, as you think about, especially in a full, I think if you realize that aid stations are going to be more spread out, there's not going to be as much help with things. Is this something where you subconsciously hold back a little bit on the bike, and it might pay off, to have, because you might need a little more quote unquote flexible energy or something on the run, where you're going to be like, I got to take this maybe a little bit even more cautious because I don't know what's coming ahead. You don't know that you're going to have, your steak dinner waiting at mile 3 every time or whatever.
No, I think it's a good point. Like, in terms of like, and we joke about this all the time. It's like, I've never in my life had an athlete finish a 7.3 Ironman and be like, Coach, dude, should have laid it out harder on the bike. Yeah, totally should have. Like, I wouldn't have been able to crush that run if I had been hard on the bike. No, I think it's a good point in terms of like having like I'm not necessarily going to advise it, but I think it goes to top of mind as you, and that's the thing, like about, and why I stress so much about just trying to be really, really aware and present in races, and not getting so caught up in the numbers and what your expectations are. People just like, you need to be, you just really need to read the situation in the race and the environment and how things are going, and then read yourself and think, all right, well, if this aid station looked like this, then I need to prepare for all of them to look like that. That means I need to do this. I need to probably, maybe even, like you said, does it mean I need to slow down on the bike? No, but doesn't mean that I need to kind of, if I'm starting the run and I see the aid stations are fairly not adequately equipped, or like they're missing things, like, all right, well, that means I probably need to get more than I would have thought of when I do come on the next one, if there are some there, to prepare for not having it again. Like, you need to start preparing, I think, for not the aid station that you're going to get to, but always work maybe an aid station or 2 ahead to make sure you're ahead of the game. So if you miss an aid station, or they don't have something, that you're not struggling, that, a lot of athletes do, like, well, I'll get, I don't need to carry that many bottles. Let's get them at the aid station. And then you roll up and you're like, oh, I can't there. Or I have to stop and get off my bike. Or, I dropped it and I kept going. Like, that sucks. And you're not going to do very well, because like, I'm at this rate, I'm basically planning on doing the 70.3 in Texas, like fully self-supported. Like, obviously I'm not planning on taking any water or nutrition from anything on the bike course. I can carry all that in person. And on the run course, I'm probably going to carry a handheld for the first half and put my blocks and stuff in my tri kit. And then if I can get through the first 10K, I can get through the last 10K without using the bottle probably. If I have to stop, I will. But if I'll know by then, because I think it's like a 2 or 3 of course, what the aid stations are going to look like. And then the last 2 to 3 or 4K, it's like you can put run a gas if you need to. But you need to plan on that instead of planning on, I don't need to wear this or have that because I can depend on it. Yeah, you should believe that they're going to offer you the best experience possible, and they're going to have the things they say they're going to have. But as we know, no matter what race, even last year, races are like, they ran out of so-and-so at, mile 20 at 9 p.m. And you're like, what? How's that possible? Or how consistently you see races like Chattanooga, Ironman Chattanooga, who's always super hot. You always hear of, they ran out of water, they ran out of ice, right? And so you're thinking, I'll get cool at the next station, when you're depending on that. Or you could just, carry something with you that can carry ice. So when you get it, you can have it. And then if you don't need it, you don't need it. But it's always better to have than to have not, and be over prepared, which is what most triathletes do. They over prepare in training. And then when they under prepare in race day, thinking, it's just going to be laid out for me, I don't need to carry extra, it's just going to weigh me down and slow me down. You're going to have to make those decisions and just be smart and be aware and just really read the situation for what it is. And again, just you have to be able to be flexible, and you have to adapt. And the athletes that race the best on that day, Maybe not to their best performance, their best of their ability, or what their fitness can truly express on the best day that they can possibly have, but the ones that do the best with what they're given on how the day unfolds, the ones that are aware, the ones that are flexible, the ones that my power meter isn't reading, I'm just going to go by feel, or my legs are telling me that they don't feel good today, I'm just going to go by feel, or I don't want to watch, I don't look at my pace, or I just want to go in how, what I'm feeling. The athletes that are the most aware of themselves and the situation are the ones that are going to execute and do their best on race day.
And I also wonder if you're going to see some, like you're expecting something and it's not there, and you may have to go with other things, or, you know what I mean? Like towards the end of a race, if you're always, used to. That's why what you're saying about managing within the race and looking ahead at aid stations and make sure you're prepared, even if they don't have something. That's pretty interesting to think about, because like, what if you're not stocked up and you're always used to depending on what's there and it's not there, and then you have to, eat a banana versus, a shock block or whatever. Like there's different, it's just going to have to be a flexible situation, I think, on a lot of times, but
especially like you said, like if you are used to taking in just one type of
that's
fluid, and like I feel like I'm very fortunate. Like I can just take it and I'm good. Like I can, whatever kind of like new, I'm just like shove it in. Like I'm good. Like I have it. And I can withstand whatever. I'm like, I don't have, just give me some leftover tailwind. I'll probably be fine. It's like, but having said that, I think what allows you to get away with making those decisions is that those decisions are top offs. You're not so behind and you're not so empty. You're not so underfueled and dehydrated and starving that as soon as you shove something in your mouth, it's hitting straight stomach and it's like, oh, this isn't going to sit well.
Right.
Like, yeah, I genuinely feel like you can top off with anything. And sometimes I'm like, I'm pretty good, but I'm gonna top off real quick. I don't know what it is or what kind of Powerade or Gatorade or whatever you're giving me, but I could probably use a top off. And I think that's, again, like, it's probably a great way to look at the run, especially is like, if you like, I don't want to waste those 3 seconds and weave in and grab a cup. I'm just going to blaze on through, like, top it off. Always top it off, because you might get to the next aid station and be like, I could really use some power. And they're like, oh, all out. Sorry, go on to the next. You're like, should have topped off. Like you always, I think that's it. You have to be that annoying person who like only lets their gas gauge get down to like, 3/4 of a tank left. Like, I gotta get gas, man. I've got 347 miles left. Yeah. Like, oh, better top it off. You have to top it off. And I think that's, again, like if you're making those nutrition choices and you've already got a stomach full of, Cliff Blocks and EFS and a Cliff Bar, a banana, if you toss in a few pretzels or, another drink, it's going to be like, what? I don't even feel that. Like, but you feel more full and like you get that feeling. So, I think it's probably it's really a great point, is to just always, even if you're on the verge of like, I'm probably too full, that's the worst. It's the worst. But when you're too full, you have to slow down, because you have to let your body catch up and use that energy you're trying to use to run or ride to help digest and process all the fluids and food you're taking in. So
that's that thing on the bike when it's cold and you have to force it down. It's just tough, man. Like you got to drink, you got to hydrate, right? Because, even though it's cold and I'm wearing like windbreakers and all this other stuff and I don't feel like I want it, but it's just, then you force it down and then you got to pee all the time. It's like,
yeah, which again is like also very common, like to have to pee so much when it's cold. Like I'm not even gonna talk like scientifically here, because that's the last thing you guys want to hear.
Trying to keep warm, and that's cooling you down.
And I'd probably, murder it, but it's like Jessica Jacobs had it. Like she had to pee like 4 or 5 times, like because it was so cold, you have to pee more. But again, like, does it sound like it's a lot? Yeah. But I mean,
it's such a problem.
It's not but like, just whatever, just like do it. Like, it's not, like, if that's the other thing, is if you go into these races thinking that it's going to be such an inconvenience and it's going to be so different and the experience is going to be ruined, and I can't believe all these things are being adjusted, and I can't believe something's like, then you're already going to have a bad experience. Like you're setting yourself up for that bad experience, and you're basically looking for the first thing that's going to go wrong and be like, see, told you, it's just not the same. Not the same. Like you're walking to transition, like race morning with a bad attitude, you're gonna step your toe in the crib, like, told you, not my day. Shouldn't even have showed up. Like I told you, this is not a good event. And you're like, dude, just get your shit together and get out there and go have fun. Seriously, go have fun. I think the biggest thing, and we'll probably close on this, is like, I think the biggest mental and emotional shift most athletes should take with these races, if you are able and you choose to race this year and you have the opportunity, is to, like, if you're taking things so seriously with so many expectations and you're putting so much pressure on one thing, is that you're going to crumble. You just are. If you go into these races and you feel grateful and you feel thankful and you are just happy to be there and just like, I made it. Like, and this is like, because if you think about it, you've been given a free chance, in my opinion. Like it's kind of like when I guess the best example I give is like when the defense jumps off sides and the quarterback hikes and they just take a shot downfield and they're like, let me see if I can get a little pass interference to score a touchdown. It doesn't matter if it gets picked, doesn't matter if it's incomplete, it's a free play. I think for a lot of athletes given this year, it's a free play. Like if you probably 3, 4, 5, 6 months ago, you're probably thinking, never would have been here. There's no way. Never would have been here. Never expected to be here. Yet here you are. And if you can just go into that race thinking, I got a free play, like that's the most dangerous I think people are, is when they feel like, we've talked about this before, the athlete that has nothing to lose, right? That races with gratitude and thankfulness and a positive, like that is the athlete I don't want to race against. I'm trying to be competitive. I don't want to race an athlete because it's free. Everything is free. There's no pressure. There's no expectations. I would take that athlete with a little bit less fitness than the athlete who's overtrained and feeling super fit, that's walking up on race day with their, Beats by Dre headphones, rocking out to some Limp Bizkit, not looking anybody in the face, taking everything super serious. No, my money isn't on that person. My money is on the person who's smiling, having a good time, thankful to be there, ready to rip it and ready to race free. I'll put my money on them, and hopefully I will put my money on you.
Yeah, because it's a long day and that stuff goes a long ways. Before you even started saying that, I looked up this quote because I thought it was a good quote to think about while you're racing. And I like what you said as a free play, because this quote says, "The root of joy is gratefulness. It is not joy that makes us grateful. It is gratitude that makes us joyful."
100%.
And when you said gratitude, I was like, well, I got to read that now because it makes sense. It's just so, like you're saying, man, I like the idea of just going out there and just being grateful that you're able to get out there. And it's so true. I definitely race better when I'm kind of freer. Because you can only bear down on an Ironman for so long. You got to take it in doses too. That's the thing, right? Like sometimes you really got to zone in and really get in that pocket. But there are a lot of opportunities to just be kind of free.
Because you're not going to bear down on the Ironman. It's going to bear down on you. And if you're trying to frown and serious face your way into bearing your way through an Ironman, it's going to eat your lunch. But if you can smile and laugh and have positive thoughts and think your way through it, that's more about, being positive and grateful and happy. And that's always one of the biggest things that I got out of reading the kind of the athlete recaps, was like the gratitude and like the positive self-talk that was there. Gratitude and appreciation and positive, that's what gets you through the day, not doubts and self-criticism and meeting of expectations and failure. Like that's what makes you crumble. Like your body feeds off energy, and it can deteriorate at negative energy. And that's that. I get on athletes all the time. A lot of times the training peaks say, I don't want you to ever say, don't ever write in here another negative comment about yourself ever again, ever, because it's hurting you. Like it physically hurts you when you write down, I'm not good at running, or I'm just not that good of a cyclist, or I really can't swim. You're not helping anything. You're not helping yourself in your development. You're not helping your attitude. You're not helping who you are. You're not helping your self-worth. You're not helping any of that. All you are is affirming that voice that is, you can't. And instead of, you need to shut its mouth and say that I can. And so be positive and choose to, like, you know what? Because once you give a voice, it's all about, what do you want to give a voice to? Do you want to give a voice to negativity, or criticism, or self-doubt, or failed expectations? Or would you rather give a voice to positivity, optimism, hope, gratitude? Like those are the things you need to race. And if you race with those, then you will 100% race better and have more fun. Book it.
Book it.
Book it.
I like it, man. But it's
hard.
It's hard. And I think you just kind of like, we set ourselves up with premature excuses when we do that. So I suck at running. Okay. Do you? Let me give you a quick story. All right.
To close this for a second time. Is
sorry. Open the door
again. Seriously. You've been out of the media business way too long. You can't even catch my cues anymore.
I caught it.
I've been working with this athlete for probably 2 years, and this goes back to being grateful, and also goes back to being like, I'm just not a runner. I can't run. I can't do this. And this athlete was coming off of, she's training for a 50 miler and just got done doing a 100-mile temp where she ended up running like 64 miles and had what I think a really good day, and ended up pulling the plug in some pretty hard conditions. And 2 years ago, her doctor was like, you're probably never going to be able to run again.
2 years ago.
And to watch this athlete develop and not just conquer like that physical fear and those phantom pains and those real pains that are, is this coming back? Am I about to injure myself again? Is this going to be the last one? And to work through, and as I was thinking through reading her comment, I was like, how do you feel overall? Because she's bouncing back from that race. She's racing for a 50 miler, and she was writing this in like, but she's like, I'm so grateful for every day that I can run. And at the same time, I'm like programming, I have the confidence as her coach to program like a pretty hard threshold run next week for her that has no fear of her like getting hurt. And to go from, you're probably never gonna be able to run again, as in you're not a runner and you can't do this, to being able to do like, that is why I love endurance sports. And that's also why I love the positive, like, the total grit attitude of like, there's just always a way. If you're willing to work hard and the biggest thing is like, don't confuse working hard with being impatient. Working hard is about patience, because it's about working hard consistently over a long period of time. It's not about working hard tomorrow. It's not about working hard, just this week. It's about working hard and smart for a long period of time. And those are like, the races are fun. I love them. I love tracking them. I love watching athletes succeed. But comments like those are why I love coaching so much, because you get to be just a small part of that journey that is like, this is being taken from you. This is a fear you have. And then to find yourself 2 years later, me feeling fine, or to program a 3.5 hour trail run on Sunday and be like, yeah, what do you mean you can't run again? It's like, that's why the sport is so great, but that's also why your attitude matters. And so, if you're having a rough day, if you had a rough year, you find yourself, complaining or poo-pooing or pouting because life is so difficult and life is so hard and woe is me and I'll never be a good biker, never be a good swimmer, and I'm never going to be a good runner, I can't do all this stuff. Well, you're making your choice for yourself by saying that you can't, by saying that you're not going to be able to, because that's what your attitude and your energy is going to follow that path. Or it could say, I might not feel like that person today, but I can become that person if I continue to work hard tomorrow, and then the next day, and then the next day, and then the next day, because you really, truly have no idea where you're going to end up. And that is why I love endurance sports so much, because it's just like life. You never know where you're going to end up. As long as you keep doing your best each day, you just honestly never know. Close us out.
I mean, that brings up something totally, no, book it. That's it.
Book it. Book it.
All right, thanks everybody.
We love you. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, whatever, hit up Mike, crushingiron@gmail.com. If you have any questions for me, I'm at c26coach@gmail.com.
Yeah, that's
I am at c26coach at gx. Exactly. It sounds like one of those like letter blocks, like type in the letters that you see. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. Yeah, I'm at c26coach@gmail.com. And again, if you want more info on our camps coaching community and our new club membership, you can go to our website. It is our one-stop shop, and that is at c26triathlon.com.
Come join us in the club.
Can I borrow 50 cents?
I might be able to pump that in.
Dude, pump it in. All right, see you, dude.
See you, man.